Giving up is not in the blood, sir. It's not in the blood.
You're listening to The Mountain Takes. I'm Isaac. There's a story we like to tell ourselves about deaths in the high mountains, that they happen to the reckless, the unprepared, the people who made mistakes we would never make. Nirmal Purja's death refuses that comfort. He was the best prepared person imaginable. An avalanche does not care. This is the story of a man who proved human potential, and a mountain that proved it doesn't matter.
Simply, do not let anybody tell you that you are not possible. Always dream big, and remember, success is not a coincidence. It takes a lot.
Nirmal Purja was born in 1983 in a remote village in the lowlands of Nepal called Bokang in the Magar region. His father was a Gurkha soldier, a Nepali fighter in the British Army, part of a military tradition that stretched back more than 2 centuries. The Gurkhas are legendary for their courage, their discipline, their ability to survive in terrain that would kill ordinary men. Nirmal was born into this legacy of toughness and service. His childhood was not comfortable. His village had no electricity, no running water, no paved roads. The nearest road was a 4-day walk away. He grew up barefoot, climbing the hills around his village, learning from an early age what his body was capable of enduring. His father's choice to become a Gurkha soldier was not just a job, it was a statement about what was possible for a poor boy from a remote village. Nirmal watched his father leave for military training and understood something fundamental. If you were willing to be harder than the mountain could not break you. In 2001, at age 18, Nirmal followed his father's path. He enlisted in the British Brigade of Gurkhas, joining the same military tradition that had defined his family. For 6 years he served as a standard Gurkha soldier, learning discipline, learning how to survive in extreme environments, learning how to perform at the edge of human capability under conditions that would exhaust ordinary people. But in 2007, something changed. Nirmal applied for selection to the Special Boat Service, the SBS, Britain's elite special forces unit. The SBS is one of the most selective special operations units in the world. Selection is brutal. It is designed to eliminate everyone except the people who are willing to endure suffering beyond what most humans believe possible. Nirmal passed. In 2008, he became the first Nepali ever to be selected for the Special Boat Service. He spent the next 8 years serving in the SBS, 8 years that taught him things that mountains would later test. He learned how to function when exhausted. He learned how to make decisions when scared. He learned how to push through the exact moment when your mind is screaming at you to stop. These were not academic lessons. These were lessons written into his nervous system through repetition, through actual danger, through real consequences. By the time Nirmal left the SBS in 2016, he had spent more than half his life in military service. He had learned how to survive in mountains, deserts, jungles, and oceans. He had learned how to lead men through impossible situations, but he had also learned something else. Mountains were calling. In his mid-30s, Nirmal Purja came to serious mountaineering relatively late in life compared to other elite climbers, but he came to it with the mental training of 2 decades in elite military service. His first serious mountaineering was in 2010, when he summited Kilimanjaro and Elbrus. He progressed quickly, Aconcagua in 2012, Denali in 2013, but these were just apprenticeships. Nirmal understood that the real mountains, the ones that separated the truly capable from everyone else, were the 8,000ers. There are only 14 mountains on Earth higher than 8,000 meters. All of them are in the Himalayas or the Karakoram range. All of them require fundamentally different abilities than lower peaks. The air at 8,000 meters contains only 1/3 the oxygen of sea level. Your body is literally dying at that altitude. Your brain is being damaged. Your core systems are shutting down, and you must climb anyway. Nirmal started with Everest in 2017. He summited, he descended safely. He had proven he could survive at extreme altitude. But something changed after that first 8,000er. Nirmal realized that the existing records in mountaineering seemed arbitrary, designed for people who had time to waste. not for people who understood what humans could actually endure. In 2017, he set a record for climbing Everest and Lhotse back-to-back in 10 hours and 15 minutes. Lhotse is the fourth highest mountain on Earth. It requires ascending from base camp at 5,364 meters to Everest's summit at 8,848 meters, descending, and then immediately climbing Lhotse at 8,516 meters. Most climbers would consider this a two-expedition undertaking spaced months apart. Nirmal did it in 10 hours and 15 minutes. In 2019, he announced something called Project Possible. The goal was to climb all 14 8,000ers in a single season, all 7 months. The existing record was just under 8 years. The climbing establishment said it was impossible. It was a publicity stunt. It was reckless. It would get people killed. Nirmal said none of that mattered. He said the record wasn't physical, it was psychological. The record was based on the false assumption that you needed months between peaks to recover. But if you chose your peaks in the right order, if you managed the logistics perfectly, if you pushed through discomfort that other climbers would interpret as a signal to stop, then 8 months was possible. Project Possible began on March 23, 2019. Nirmal climbed Annapurna, Dhaulagiri, Kangchenjunga, Lhotse, Everest, Makalu, Cho Oyu, Manaslu, Nanga Parbat, Broad Peak, Gasherbrum 1, Gasherbrum 2, Shishapangma, and Kilimanjaro. 14 mountains, 7 countries, 6 months and 6 days, 189 days. He summited all 14 8,000ers faster than anyone in history. The achievement was so significant that Netflix turned it into a documentary called 14 Peaks, Nothing is Impossible, and Nirmal was awarded the Order of the British Empire for his services to mountaineering and his advocacy for Sherpa welfare. But here's what mattered most. During Project Possible, in April 2019 on Annapurna, a Malaysian climber named Dr. Chin Wee Kin became stranded high on the mountain. He was alone at around 7,500 meters without a tent, without food, without water, without bottled oxygen. He had been stranded for more than 40 hours. By any reasonable expectation, he should already have been dead. His brain should have ceased functioning. His body should have gone into fatal shutdown. But Nirmal made a decision. He held back some of his strongest climbers from his Project Possible summit push. He organized a rescue team. He led a 4-man rescue team up into the death zone to find a climber he had never met. They reached Dr. Chin after 4 more hours of climbing. They found him still conscious, still able to think, still able to move. They brought him down alive. It took a miracle of speed and strength to do it, but it wasn't quite enough. Dr. Chin died days later in a hospital in Singapore. His body was too damaged by those 40 hours in the death zone. Nirmal said afterward that the delay in launching the rescue had cost precious time that might have saved Chin's life. After Project Possible, Nirmal continued climbing. In 2021, he was part of the historic first winter ascent of K2, the second highest mountain on Earth, and considered by many to be the world's most difficult and dangerous mountain. In 2024, he completed all 14 8,000ers a second time, this time without supplemental oxygen, an achievement no one else had ever accomplished. By the summer of 2026, he had summited 8,000ers more than 50 times. 50 ascents to altitudes where humans should not be able to function. 50 times returning from the death zone. 50 times surviving what should have killed him. He had built companies. He had founded a charity dedicated to the welfare of Nepal's high-altitude porters and the Sherpa people who do the essential work that makes mountaineering possible. He had spent his entire fortune and his entire fame pushing for recognition of guides and Sherpas, the invisible people who make expeditions possible and who have been exploited and ignored by the climbing industry for a century. He had become the most famous mountaineer on the planet.
I'm now currently running for 58th summit of 1,000-meter peaks, which is the highest in the world.
And in July 2026, he added one more peak to his list of goals, Broad Peak. Broad Peak stands at 8,047 meters in Pakistan's Karakoram Range, near K2. It is the 12th highest mountain on Earth. It has a reputation as one of the easier 8,000ers, less technical than K2, less unpredictable than Annapurna. That reputation is a trap. Nothing above 8,000 meters is easy. Broad Peak has killed climbers for decades. The route between Camp 2 and Camp 3 is one of the most avalanche-prone sections on any 8,000er. Enormous slopes of snow sit loaded above the climbing route. They release on no schedule a human can predict, triggered by fresh snowfall, by shifts in temperature, by the collapse of ice cliffs far above, sometimes by nothing anyone can name. When an avalanche releases above climbers strung out on an open face, there is often nothing those climbers can do. No amount of skill outruns a wall of snow. No amount of strength anchors you to a mountain when the surface beneath your feet becomes a slide. Mountaineers call this objective hazard, danger that belongs to the mountain itself, not to any error the climber makes.
Namaste. Right now, I'm at Camp 2 of Broad Peak, which is 1,000-meter mountains.
You can be the fittest, most experienced, most careful climber in the world and still be standing in exactly the wrong place when the slope decides to move. By July 2026, Broad Peak had been showing signs of instability for a week. Heavy snowfall began blanketing the mountain around July 22nd. To an experienced eye, fresh snow piled on steep slopes above a climbing route is the raw material of an avalanche. It is a loaded gun waiting for a trigger. Climbers around Broad Peak saw it. Many teams made the decision to descend and wait. David Kleen, a climber who had spent a month on Broad Peak hoping to summit without supplemental oxygen, looked at the conditions and made a calculation. After heavy snowfall, you do not simply want good weather, you want several days in which the new snow either bonds to the mountain or slides off on its own before you commit to climbing above it. By July 25th, Kleen and his partner had packed up and left. Most of the teams at base camp had already gone home. The mountain had told them what it was, and they listened. A few teams stayed. Among them was Nirmal Purja. Broad Peak was a late addition to Nirmal's 2026 season. He had decided to add it almost at the last minute because summiting Broad Peak would leave him one summit away from a goal no one had ever achieved, becoming the first person ever to climb all 14 8,000ers 3 times. On July 27th, 3 days before he set out, Nirmal posted what would become his final public message. It was a long, defiant statement about the climb ahead.
Namaste. Right now, I'm at Camp 2 of Broad Peak, which is 1,000-meter mountains.
He answered his critics. He laid out his mission, and he wrote a line that reads very differently now. I take 0 mountains for granted, not one. The moment my foot leaves base camp, it's 100%, always has been, always will be.
But this message got downloaded as well, so I will be in touch after the summit.
Near the end of that message, almost like a prayer, he addressed the mountain directly. Broad Peak, I ask for nothing but safe passage up and back down. On the morning of July 30th, 2026, 4 teams were moving between Camp 2 and Camp 3 at approximately 6,600 meters, a section every climber on Broad Peak must cross, going up and coming back down. Nirmal Purja's team included Pur Bahadur Gurung, known as Yukta, a certified international mountain guide from Nepal and one of Nirmal's most trusted partners. It also included 3 Sherpa guides, Kili Pemba Sherpa, also known as Kelu, who had summited Everest 15 times and been part of the historic first winter ascent of K2, Nima Sherpa, and Nawang Thindu Sherpa. But Nirmal's team was not the only one on that section of mountain. Sohail Saki, one of Pakistan's most respected climbers, was guiding an American client named Mallory Geis. Geis was a 39-year-old travel photographer and Pilates studio owner from San Antonio, Texas. Broad Peak was her first 8,000er. Months before arriving at base camp, she had written about northern Pakistan. I've never felt more at peace in another place. Broad Peak was her first great mountain. It would also be her last. Another guide, Gyalu Sherpa, was also on the mountain. Nadira Al-Harthi, the first Omani woman to summit Everest, was climbing with her own team. Wang Zhang of China was part of the group. Together, these 10 climbers from 5 countries were moving through what would become the deadliest hour of their lives. At approximately 9:20 a.m. on July 30th, the slope released. A massive avalanche was triggered on the route between Camp 2 and Camp 3. The exact cause is still not definitively documented. Whether it was natural failure of the snowpack, whether it was triggered by climber activity, whether it was caused by falling ice or serac collapse. But what is certain is that the avalanche swept down the west face and caught all 10 climbers in the open. The force was catastrophic. They were carried down the mountain with a violence that left nothing to hold on to. Their satellite trackers recorded what no human witness could. In moments, their positions dropped hundreds of meters down the face. Some were carried almost to the foot of the mountain, nearly a vertical mile below where they had been standing. Then there was silence. The entire group was out of contact. All 10 climbers had vanished. But here is where the story transforms from tragedy into something more complex and more troubling. The avalanche struck at approximately 9:20 a.m., but the alarm, the call that would launch helicopters and rescuers, did not go out until approximately 10 p.m. that same evening, nearly 13 hours. An entire day of daylight had been lost. The only window in which helicopters might have reached the avalanche site to search for survivors was simply gone. Every team on these mountains keeps staff at base camp. Other climbers are usually present too. Yet somehow for 13 hours, no one below knew that 10 people had been swept off the face above them. The Alpine Club of Pakistan confirmed this afterward. We only found out at 10 p.m. We are all shocked. By the time the sun rose again on July 31st, the situation had transformed from a potential rescue into a recovery operation. Rescue in the Pakistani Karakoram runs largely through the military. Helicopter flights require clearances that take time. It is a slower system than the private helicopter response available to climbers in Nepal. Combined with poor weather that grounded aircraft anyway, help could not move quickly even once the alarm was finally raised. Ground teams began working up from lower camps. Climbers at nearby expeditions on K2, on the same day that the avalanche struck Broad Peak, made decisions to abandon their own summit attempts and turn back to help search for people many of them had never met. It was one of the few points of grace in this story. The mountaineering world, rivalries and summit dreams and all, stopped, turned around, and went to help. But the mountain and the delay had already decided the outcome. By the time the weather cleared enough to search with force, this was a recovery, not a rescue. Over the days that followed, teams working on foot and by helicopter, aided by drones scanning the debris, began locating the dead. The first 3 bodies positively identified were Nadira Al-Harthi of Oman, Pur Bahadur Gurung, Yukta, and Mallory Geis, the American travel photographer who had never felt more at peace anywhere than in the mountains that killed her. The next day, a 4th body was brought down. Nepal's prime minister confirmed it was Nirmal Purja. Several others remained on the mountain as search operations continued. On August 1, 2 days after the avalanche, Nirmal's company Elite Exped confirmed what the mountain had already made near certain. Nims Purja had died, and none of the expedition had survived. The mountain and the machines he carried left a record clear enough to reconstruct with real confidence what happened to him. At approximately 9:20 a.m., Nirmal was on the move between Camp 2 and Camp 3, at roughly 6,600 meters on the standard route, ground he had every reason to expect to climb without incident. As an expedition leader and one of the strongest climbers alive, he was almost certainly near the front. Above him and his teammates hung a week's worth of accumulated snow on a slope steep enough to hold it and unstable enough to release it. When it let go, it came without meaningful warning. An avalanche on open terrain moves faster than a person can react. By the time the sound registers, the snow is already there. The Garmin device on Nirmal's wrist recorded what happened next in cold numbers. His position dropped roughly 800 meters, half a mile straight down the west face. A fall of 800 meters in avalanche debris is in almost every case not survivable. The impacts on the way down and the burial under compacted snow leave almost no margin, even for the fittest human on a mountain. The Alpine Club of Pakistan said as much while he was still officially missing. His chances were very slim. From the instant that slope released above him, the outcome was almost certainly beyond his control and beyond the reach of any skill he had spent his entire life building. But we can know certain things with confidence. The other Sherpas on his team, Kili Pemba, Nima Sherpa, Nawang Thindu Sherpa, died the same way. Sohail Saki, Pakistan's most respected climber, died trying to guide Mallory Geis down the mountain. Gyalu Sherpa, a high-altitude worker of the kind Nirmal spent his fame fighting to get recognized, died in the same avalanche. Nadira Al-Harthi, the pioneering Omani mountaineer, died. Wang Zhong of China, died. All 10 climbers from 5 different countries died in that single moment when the snow decided to move. There is a story we like to tell ourselves about deaths in the high mountains.
आशिष भाइ है आफू नै हो यो के रे उताबाट आउने यताउति गर्ने सिसापाङमा के रे यो छोइसकेपछि मेरो ब्रोड पिक जाँदैछु ब्रोड पिक मैले समिट हान्ने बित्तिकै हैन ह्याट्रिक प्रोजेक्ट त भयो वर्ल्डको फर्स्ट एन्ड ओन्ली ह्युमन टु क्लाइम्ब 14 पिक्स 2 टाइम्स विदाउट अक्सिजन है जन खतरा त्यसले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ यसो आफ्नो तर्फबाट प्लानिङ यताउति गरिराख्नु है मेरो भाइ
That they happened to the reckless, the unprepared, the people who did something we would never do. That story lets us believe we would be safe. Nirmal Purja's death refuses that comfort from both directions at once. On one hand, he was the best prepared person imaginable. He had spent 40 years learning how to survive in extreme environments. He had trained in the world's elite military unit. He had summited the world's highest mountains 50 times. An avalanche does not care. It fell where it fell at the hour it fell on whoever happened to be beneath it. The finest climber of his generation could no more outrun it than anyone else. That is the pure indifferent cruelty of objective hazard. It is real. But on the other hand, this was not a bolt from a clear sky. The snow had been building for a week. Other climbers had read the mountain and left. The hardest truth of this disaster is that the mountain gave a warning. Some of the very best chose to climb past it anyway. And then when the mountain struck, the people below took 13 hours to even know. Both things are true. It was bad luck, and it was a chain of human decisions. Untangling how much of each will take far longer than the news cycle that carried Nirmal's name around the world. What isn't in question is what was lost. 10 climbers from 5 countries, guides and mentors and first-timers, a woman who had never felt more at peace anywhere than in the mountains that killed her, a man who had spent his whole extraordinary life proving that human beings were capable of more than they believed, a man who died asking that mountain only for safe passage up and back down. Broad Peak did not grant it. It never promised to. That was always the arrangement for Nirmal Purja, and for everyone who has ever tied into a rope below a loaded slope and started upward anyway. The mountain is beautiful, and the mountain is worth it, and the mountain does not love you back. Nirmal understood this arrangement better than almost anyone on earth. He understood that mountains operate by physical laws that do not negotiate with human ambition. He had climbed into the death zone 50 times. He had come down alive 49 times. And then on July 30th, 2026, on Broad Peak, the mountain collected what it was always entitled to collect. I'm Isaac from the Mountain Takes. This is the story of Nirmal Purja, from a barefoot boy in a remote Nepali village to the world's most accomplished mountaineer, to the moment an avalanche proved that no amount of preparation, no amount of courage, no amount of dedication makes you immune to the mountain's indifference. The man who spent his career being the person who comes for you when the mountain has you understood better than anyone how a delay can turn a survivable emergency into a fatal one. In the end, he was the one no one reached in time. Rest in peace to all 10.
There are 8 billion people in the world, and if you want to be number one, you must be working harder than the rest of the 8 billion people.